What we realize today is that the deadlines in several states and cities are arriving for people to get these mandatory vaccinations with no testing options. It was, in many places, get the vax, or you can be tested twice weekly or every day or however onerous it was. It was at least an off-ramp for people. No longer. And there's just a couple examples. New York City, this is actually a very big deal. New York City, public employees now must get the vaccine. It's mandated. They had already implemented on education and public health workers. Now it's all city workers. We're talking cops, firefighters, paramedic, first responders, prison guards, you name it. All of them have to get at least one dose by next Friday, 10/29. Otherwise, they're all going on unpaid leave until they provide the proof of vaccination. We are going to have thousands of cops, firefighters, and other workers, correction officers included, off the job soon in New York if this stands, because you've got 30% of the cops in New York unvaccinated, 40% of the firefighters unvaccinated. It's not like they can't get the vaccine now. If these guys are unvaccinated, it's because they don't want the vaccine. Correction officers in Massachusetts and elsewhere, 40% of the prison officers in Massachusetts not vaccinated, and so on. 50% of the paramedics in New York unvaccinated. All these folks, they don't want it. And now they're about to get fired or lose their paycheck unless they get it. And to me, it seems like other than a whack-a-mole lawsuit here, a whack-a-mole lawsuit there, it doesn't feel like there's a heck of a lot we can or are doing about it. What say you?
Well, I want to say that, first of all, thanks for having me on, Megyn. It's great to be back with you. Sure. I am opposed to these vaccine mandates at the state level and especially at the federal level. And I say especially at the federal level because it's just unconstitutional. It's unauthorized. There simply is no legal authority for the president to direct private entities all across the country. I don't care what their size is, whether it's 100 or more, or 50 or more, or 2, it doesn't matter. But he does not have the authority to direct them to force employees to get vaccines. And, I think that as to what you've been pointing out, I mean, it's quite the irony that our essential workers, as we called them all last year, the people who in the teeth of this pandemic went to work, kept us safe, delivered our food, educated our kids. Now, when these same folks say, well, hold on, actually, I want to make my own informed medical choice. I don't want to get the vaccine. Now we say to them, oh, well, fall into line, shut up, or be fired. It is quite the turnaround coming from, frankly, this administration and its allies all across the country. And I think it's a huge mistake. I mean, the other thing about it I'll say is, why would you want to drive people out of their jobs, these essential workers out of their jobs at this time? I mean, Joe Biden and his allies are fomenting an unemployment crisis in the midst of every other crisis we're facing.
Yes. So you went to Stanford undergrad, you went to Yale Law School, you clerked for Judge McConnell, 10th Circuit, one of the most respected judges in the country, then on to clerk for Chief Justice John Roberts. So just in case our viewers don't understand, you're very well educated in the law, you're a practicing attorney. What would you tell people to do? Because the way I see it so far, the challenges by those who have said, I have natural immunity and therefore you shouldn't be able to force me, are failing. The challenges saying you have to give me a religious exemption are doing better. But I mean, I moved to Connecticut in September, and here the governor, they passed a law getting rid of the religious exemption for all public school students. You're not even allowed to raise it. And I do wonder whether that's constitutional, or if, in any place, whether removing a religious or a medical exemption is lawful.
I think it's not, Megyn, is my view on that. And I think the religious exemption is the really key piece of this. I think it's not lawful. It's not constitutional to say to students, to parents, to whomever, that if you have a sincere religious objection to getting this vaccine, that, oh, sorry, you're just out of luck. First Amendment doesn't apply to you. I mean, what we're dealing with here is what's called, what the law calls, the police powers. And by the way, the police powers are something that states have. The federal government doesn't have them. That's why Joe Biden can't just go out and say, oh, I want you all to get the vaccine, I'm going to force you to do it. He does not have that authority. At the state level, though, we've always said that while state governments can exercise general police powers, what they cannot do is trample on constitutional rights in doing so. And there's a lot to case law. It's not like this has just never been thought of before, it's only being thought of in this context. There's many cases over many years about religious objectors, and others too, on grounds of free speech and other things, but particularly when it comes to the First Amendment right of free exercise, conscientious objectors saying, I can't perform that activity, I don't want to take that vaccine, And we have long recognized under our Constitution and our laws a religious exemption. So I think now this new ground that some of these states are trying to break, and frankly the federal government's trying to do it too because they're trying to take away religious exemptions, it's dangerous. It's not just dangerous for this context, Megyn, it's dangerous going forward because it removes yet another check on government power telling people how they have to live their lives.
Yes. And the thing is, I know one mom who was told, and this is the policy at a lot of schools, unless you're already on record as being an objector to vaccines, you can't raise a religious exemption now in response to the COVID mandate. Well, that's crazy talk because not all vaccines were tested on copies of stem cells, which Catholics and Christians in particular might very well have an objection to. How can you have a pre-existing objection to a vaccine that didn't even exist about a year ago?
No, I think that's exactly right. And this is another example of the narrowing down or attempted narrowing down of these religious exemptions and claims. And your point, Megyn, I think is really an important one. Vaccines are different. They're composed differently. They're manufactured differently. They're made differently. So this is why we have a process where people can say, well, listen, I have a religious objection to this vaccine for these reasons, and then they can be heard. But what you and I are talking about is they're not even able to be heard. People come in and they say, I've got a religious exemption, I have a religious objection, and they're being told by governmental authorities, no, just shut up and go away. I mean, we're not going to listen to it. We don't care. We're not going to recognize it. Boy, that is dangerous ground to break here. And I think that I'm ultimately hopeful that as these cases make their way into the federal court system and probably up to the U.S. Supreme Court, I hope that the courts will continue our tradition in the country of saying, hold on. You can't, just because the government feels strongly about it doesn't mean they can suspend our First Amendment rights. And I hope they'll uphold that in these cases as well.